Hello and welcome to Just the Facts podcast. This is your April 6th, 2020 update, and I'm your host, Dr. Michael Bechill. You're listening to the podcast that focuses on all things coronavirus, what's happening around the country, what's happening in your neighborhoods, but most of all, just the facts. Today is a neat new concept that we're giving a shot here. It's a mini episode, so it should be short and sweet, but still, I think, a very important message. What we're going to do is give you a brief update on the pandemic numbers. Then we're going to do an interview with one of my students, Irish Starky. So she's a pre-medical student at the University of St. Francis and originally from the Philippines. So let's go ahead and jump right in and get an update on those numbers from Chen. And so next, what I'd like to do is welcome Chen back onto the show, who's going to give us some updates on some of the modeling, what we're seeing, and some differences that we're seeing back between these states. How are you doing on this wonderful Monday night, Chen?
Oh, I'm just really peachy. Thanks for asking.
Excellent. Well, the first thing I think we're going to talk about is the big picture, right? You look at the United States overall. Can you tell us what the modeling is telling you?
Yeah, so overall in the U.S., we think we have an estimate of the peak. But before I go forward today, I just want to say that United States is what it sounds like. It's different states. So this might not apply to certain states like New York or Alaska, who are so extremes right now. So generally speaking, in the U.S., we believe that we're looking at a peak around the 16th or the 17th. What that means is that is going to be the day of the most cases and most death. It doesn't mean that is a good day. I mean, after that, we will still see high death, high cases. It will just start slowly going down.
So once we hit this peak, I think there's maybe a misconception that once we peak, it's kind of done. Everything's kind of over with. And that's not going to be what happens, correct?
No, it really depends on what we do afterwards. Because once that peak comes down, we can go down as the best case scenario will go down as fast as we climb up. But more realistically, we'll probably gently slope down, which means that we'll probably be under lockdown for a while for a lot of the states still.
Gotcha.
The peak does not mean it's done. Peak just means that it is the worst day.
Yeah. So if we're looking at this graph over here, best estimates again are that we are going to be peaking somewhere around the next 10 days-ish, that ballpark.
And 10 to 11 days.
Will be between, most models are agreeing between 2,000 and 3,100, somewhere in that ballpark, deaths on that peak day. Now, that doesn't mean that the next day it goes down dramatically. It'll just be slightly lower than that peak number. But I think you said it correctly in that once we peak, it is going to take several months to kind of get back down to even where we are today.
And that also depends on where you are, right? So some states are going to flatten out is the correct term for being done. And some states will probably still have a few second waves and third waves too. So.
Gotcha. Okay. So would you like to maybe go through a few of these states individually?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right. How about we start off over in kind of the first hit epicenter here in the United States, and that was Washington. Can you talk a little bit about this data?
So Washington is really interesting because Washington, as you say, was the first state. Washington is also a little outlier because Washington had a lot of, and I hate to use people's lives as numbers, but Washington had a lot of clusters of death. and cases, which kind of skewed the number a little bit. But that being said, Washington is one of the 3 states that is over testing. So their data is the most accurate, if you will say. So according to the calculation, Washington is going to peak around... they already peaked, actually. Sorry. So Washington has peaked March 37th.
Oh, really?
Sorry, no, that doesn't make sense. 27th, sorry, 27th is what. So they peaked a week and a half ago. So what that means is, as you can see from the graph, they're still kind of climbing, but these, as I say, they're a little bit of an outlier, which is why it might not be so accurate.
So you're expecting this model, instead of going up here to this projection line, you're expecting it to kind of shallow out a little bit?
Yes. So I think they will go down. Significantly, by going down, I mean the rate. Let me confirm that by looking some other data I have here.
While you're doing that, I noticed on this graph in particular, when we're looking at this data, their data is jumpy. A lot of these graphs are pretty smooth in that, the line isn't moving up and down. This looks almost like a bad heartbeat or a heart attack or something. Why do we have so much noise in these figures when we're looking at all these data combined?
Well, so that really depends on the testing the day, right? How many lab technicians are actually pumping out the results, how many swabs they did the day before. So that's not really smooth. So that's kind of a prediction. But yeah, so it looks like Washington is smoothing off a little bit. I don't agree with the peak that they spit out here, which is 27th of last month. As you can see, they're still climbing a little bit, but you can tell definitely it's a lot less than what it was.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because their first update that came out here out of March 26th, right? This was their first kind of like modeling update here, and they were projecting maybe out all the way, maybe all the way out until almost May to peaking. And this latest update with all this data combined is kind of a lot closer to what you're saying.
Right. It does make sense because they are the first state that got hit. So it will make sense that they will peak first.
Yeah, very good. Now, the state that I think is kind of getting almost all the love in the news and everything is New York. So tell me what you're seeing here on this combined update coming out of New York.
So as you can tell, that New York had one of the highest jumps. It's that sharp peak that we talked about. And one of the benefits of the sharp peak, unfortunately, it's going to be a lot of death, but it also means that it's going to end sooner. So New York is predicted at 9th, which is a few days from now. So today is the 6th. So by Thursday, Friday, we could see them having the worst day of their this wave, at least.
Yeah, and their numbers really are starting to flatten out in New York.
Yeah.
An interesting one, kind of an outlier, so to speak, is Louisiana. What are we seeing there?
So Louisiana is actually really interesting because they had a really late mitigation. And not only that, they had Mardi Gras around right before this hit. So we had a lot of cases jumping up real fast. And what's interesting is Mardi Gras actually saw several waves within their wave. You can see from those graphs right there. Actually multiple waves. They actually at one point had one of the highest death rate if you exclude like small cities like Washington D.C. and Island, something like that. So but they're also flying out a little bit now too. Louisiana, I'm looking at. They predict that Louisiana has already seen the worst day. And I could probably agree with that because the last few days, their number has been dropping.
Okay. Interesting. What are you seeing out of Michigan?
Oh, I just want to add one more thing to Louisiana.
Oh,
Sorry about that. No, you're fine. Louisiana also is one of the 3 states that is testing super accurately. So their data is very accurate.
Good. So we feel like we can trust this data coming out of Louisiana.
Yes, definitely.
How about that state up north there? Michigan, what are we seeing out of them? It looks like their numbers, I mean, it's getting out of hand almost. I think they're getting close to California type numbers.
Yeah, so they actually passed California. For a while, they were kind of neck to neck. So California and Michigan report differently. Michigan, like the other Midwest states, they report once a day, where California, they report several times a day. So for a while, it's kind of like a neck and neck race. In the morning, Michigan will win. In the afternoon, California will win. Next day, Michigan will win again. I guess I probably not should be using the word win, but ranking wise, they're definitely on the 3rd right now. They also got hit really, really hard. They had a really high R naught. If you've been following my posts and updates, that means they jumped up really high, just like New York did. And ironically, New York and Michigan have the same peak day, which is the 9th. So later this week, but we'll see both New York and Michigan have their worst days
At the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is interesting. And so for those of you that are not familiar with the various virology terminology that's being used, R naught is for each case that you have, how many others are getting infected. What do those numbers look like? And so that changes dramatically for various diseases. There are some diseases such as measles that one case can cause, for example, 12 to 18 other cases. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty high R naught value. Mm-hmm. The R naught value for the current SARS-CoV-2 or the coronavirus that's the current pandemic, we're seeing that R naught number bounce a little bit from country to country, state to state. And so just so that terminology means something for those non-scientific listeners. Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Talk about your home state here, the beautiful land of Ohio.
Mm-hmm. So we can actually talk about Ohio and Indiana about the same time because they're actually holding hands every day. Actually, they're literally every day they're about the same number, which is good because Ohio and Indiana, comparatively to Michigan, is doing really well. They're the definition of flattening that curve. And they are predicted. Ohio's predicted at worst day is the 12th, possibly as late as 20th, but I definitely want to see 12th. And Indiana is also 16th, so not too far behind, because Indiana has also had a late start compared to Ohio.
Yeah.
So Cleveland. My prediction would probably be because Cleveland is an international airport. So if you start looking at the international airports, those are always the areas that got hit the most, the highest. Does Indianapolis have an international airport or no?
Well, they call it an Indianapolis airport. It's mostly because they have a flight that goes to Canada once a day.
Okay, so it's not really like Cleveland or DWT with Detroit or O'Hare.
Correct.
So that's where you see the most hits. So Indiana and Ohio doing really well. Now we are going to see a later peak. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but that also means we're going to also see a later flatten out. That means we need to hunker down longer than normal.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the update, Chen. We look forward. We'll do a longer kind of data description and and talking about this outbreak more on our Friday episode, but I appreciate you for the early week update. Thank you so much.
Yep, and I just want to remind, this is very preliminary predictions. Obviously, things can change, and as we go on through every day, it will become more and more accurate. They also might be less accurate because something else might happen. So every day, every hour is different. Okay?
It's one of the neat things about, looking at the science behind these outbreaks is that it truly is an evolving story. Mm-hmm. What comes out one day might not be true the next day. So, for example, there was all of that hype about chloroquine and azithromycin being kind of basically the cure for this infection. And I just read a primary article that hadn't made it officially to press yet, showing that so far in the United States that's maybe not holding true. And so this truly is an evolving story. So thank you so much for your efforts to stay on top of it with me. And I look forward to seeing you later in the week.
All right. Hopefully, just let everybody know the worst is yet to come. We are approaching the eye of the storm. Okay?
Excellent. I think that's a great analogy, and we will all buckle down and look forward to your update on Friday. Thank you so much, Jen.
All right. Stay at home, everybody.
Yep. And next on the show, I am honored to have Irish Starky, who is a pre-medical student at the University of St. Francis in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And today, Irish is joining us on the phone from Albion, Indiana. So it's very nice to talk to you, Irish. How are you doing this evening?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, very well. Can't complain. Life is going pretty well. Surviving the lockdown. How is it going for you?
It's going good. We're just trying to survive as well, trying to be okay with what's going on.
It's definitely a big change in life for most people. The reason that Irish is on the show today is that she is actually from the Philippines, and she immigrated here from 2012, moved here with her mom, and now with her dad, they reside here in the United States, and she is a student at St. Francis, like I mentioned earlier. And you have kind of had this building anxiety, and we touched on it a little bit earlier with Dr. Kelly, but could you explain, kind of put a face to what your experience is, what concerns you have in your day-to-day life? How does this pandemic look for you?
So right now, when this pandemic started, I never really thought that racial discrimination was going to be an actual issue. I mean, it was in the air, but then it was something that I never really saw coming. But then when it actually started and I see people from the Asian race posting their experiences about how they're being treated lately. When we first heard of this pandemic, I was reading a post of a lady who got treated really badly when she was flying, just because she was Asian. And then a few weeks ago, I saw news about a child and a parent who got stabbed just because they were Asian. And then not even a few days ago, there was also a doctor in Indianapolis who was basically discriminated by not being let in a gas station. So hearing all that, my anxiety actually kind of started getting alarmed, and it was rising, because in my 8 years of living here, this is probably the first time that I've actually felt uncomfortable for my race, because in my whole life, I've never really experienced any discrimination of anything. However, when I kept hearing about how Asians are treated here, it was like kind of like there was like a paranoia that's starting to feel like I started to feel that paranoia inside of me, and then thinking that if these people are just out and about, doing their whatever they're doing on a daily basis, what is that going to look like for me in the future? Because I'm an essential worker too, so I have to go out and work, and then we also have to go out and do groceries and stuff. And I have never felt really paranoid. But then when I went out in the public a few days ago, I was actually like afraid. And my mom and I went to go get groceries. And then we were like looking back and forth, looking side to side, because I was paying attention of how people were looking at us, because I hear everybody like just mistreating Asians in general, just because this virus is from an Asian origin in China. And then when we would go out, when we were at the grocery store, I was mostly paying attention of if people were looking at us funny, or if they were like talking to us in a weird way to where like it sounds like they're discriminating us. Fortunately, they weren't like that. They were actually very nice. But then that doesn't mean that, I could, like, that doesn't mean that I will never get to experience something like that, because it is a time where things being discriminated is a possibility for somebody of my race. So it's definitely something of a concern that I'm like afraid of. Not wholly afraid of, but like kind of just like getting anxious about, because who knows when one day I'm going to be like just out and about and somebody just comes up to me and just like does something that like discriminate me or just say something mean. And then like I've never been treated badly before because of my race, so I wouldn't know how to react in the first place. However, like whenever I know people always talk about how to like address people who are like that, I kind of just have to remind myself that if I ever come across with people like that, I just have to like be understanding and not react badly back towards them, because like I get it that there's a fear that's going around because of it, but I know that this is not a time to hate on the Asian race. And like it is understandable that there are other people out there who are scared, and sometimes when you're scared that you react in a way that it's not like you react in a way that it's not good, and people who are mistreating those Asians, that's an example of that. So I understand it, but then at the same time, like it's not my fault, I mean, the virus doesn't know any race. And the fact that like it is kind of sad, it is actually sad to be living in these times where my own race is blamed for something that they could not control. So that was one of the things that really just like baffled me, is because like why are these Asians being treated so badly, when it's not their fault in the first place. And like I always like think about like if my mother is going to be out there just doing something, like would she be treated the same way? Or like if I'm going to be out there doing something, would I be treated the same way? So it is definitely a concern that we have, especially in the household. Like right now, when we started seeing news articles of this, it keeps constantly happening. And then that was the thing that really alarmed me, is that I didn't think it was going to get worse, but then now like I see more and more, and I'm just like kind of starting to get paranoid, because like this shouldn't be happening, but I guess we can't help it these days. However, like because of that, my mom and I have actually like tried to be in public less. I know like I'm essential worker, so I'm limited to just going from home to work and going back home. Like I don't even try to go anywhere. Like I try to go to places less as possible, because like in the back of my head, I'm always like concerned that that's going to happen to me. So.
Yeah. No, I really do appreciate you coming on to the show and kind of giving the audience a little bit of what's on your mind. Again, like you said, even going out to get groceries, there's that extra anxiety, and I really am hopeful that you continue to experience what you have so far in northern Indiana.
Yeah.
just a lot of hospitality and kind people. And so I think here in the Midwest, that's what we're trying to do as a whole, is just to uplift everybody. And I'm happy to hear that you haven't had any issues yourself personally. Now, an interesting tie-in also to this is that yesterday there were some pretty inflammatory comments. Again, you're from the Philippines.
Yeah.
There's some pretty inflammatory comments from President Duterte from the Philippines itself to the message towards his people. And you have some interesting connections with President Duterte. Could you kind of tell us just briefly about that?
Yeah, so before I came to the America, I lived in a city called Davao City. And when I was there, so before President Duterte was the president, he was the mayor of my city. So he spent years, I spent years actually knowing him and even got to see him in person. So I was quite familiar of how he runs the city. So when I knew he's a caring person. I know a lot of people out there are trying to criticize him for what he said yesterday, which is understandable. But then from my own experiences as a city, we all loved him because when he was our mayor, he made sure that everybody was safe in our city. He made sure that there was not a lot of crimes going on. So there was a lot of laws that needed to be followed, but then he was trying to make sure that everybody was okay, and he was trying to make sure that there was not there was no danger in our city. And then our city was definitely safe when he was ruling. And then when he became a president, I was not surprised that people actually voted for him, because when he was the mayor in our city, people already knew what he was like. So people already knew what he was capable of. However, yesterday when he made that address, it was very straightforward. And yes, he is a very straightforward person. And I know that it's causing a lot of division in the country right now of what he said, because some people are actually, obviously when the person says that, you're going, he did say that he straightforwardly said that it was going to be shot dead. Anyone who was going to be shot dead. And then
they were breaking quarantine.
Yeah, exactly. So whenever I read that and then I try to understand who he is, I think it's his way of basically just making sure that people were going to follow the quarantine rules, making sure that nobody was going out and about so that the infection is going to be less in the country. However, it is very straightforward. So there's people out there who are saying that we don't need this, because I actually followed up with it yesterday, because after he said it, when he addressed the nation, everybody had a lot of a mixture of reactions. There was the whole country was divided, where the northern part of the country was against it. And then the southern part was because they knew who he was, they weren't totally against it. They were trying to do their best to understand why he was saying it. And then the ones who were in the northern part, they were saying that, we don't need this right now. I would hear there's celebrities in the Philippines that were speaking up and saying that, this is not the way to help the country. They thought that it was too harsh to say that. And then the southern part, which is where I'm from, and I see these reactions on Facebook all the time because I have friends from the Philippines, and then they would share every tweet, every post, and they would have their own reactions as well. They were trying to then their side, they were trying to say that, they were trying to do their best to understand that he may be doing this for a good reason. He may be doing this to make sure that everyone is safe. And then I think whenever I think about that, I think it was just because of the fact that they're probably they probably know who he is already. However, in the northern part, because he he hasn't been a president for that long that there's still like they can still have that criticism that is not really seen a lot in the southern part where he was originally from. So it's definitely like a divided country right now. And my thoughts about it, I try to stay out of politics, but understanding both, there's a, like, I try to understand both sides, and their claims are, like, I get why they're saying this is not okay. And I also get the people who are saying that I guess he could be doing this for a reason. However, like, in the end, I think I'm always like hoping that both sides can come together where they can understand each other, and just basically like be there for each other and support support each other as a whole, because I know the president is just doing his best, to make sure that every single person in the Philippines is like safe, and that maybe like there was him being that straightforward, he came to that decision because like he probably wanted to make sure that nobody was going out and then like possibly infecting other people, because it could be his way. I know some people might not see it, but it could be his way of like showing that this is my way of like this,
safe.
Yeah, it's his way of like making sure that the country is safe altogether, so that nobody like can get infected. Because I know there people are getting infected there already. I think they just started having positive cases, and
they're just starting up with their kind of upward curve.
Yeah, exactly. So they're just he was like trying to address that quickly, but his decision, I think, took everyone back and really like shocked everyone, because I mean it's a very
pretty profound statement, no matter how you cut it.
Yeah. I mean, even looking at it on both sides, there's really like he has no filter. That's like, that was the only thing one thing I remembered from him is like he was honest, and he was always like he says what he needed to say, and then like that, and that's why people really like followed him and like supported him, because like there was no ifs and buts on him, but like he, like, when he made a decision, he made it right there. So yeah, but I try to like stay out of that now, because like I just read what people are saying on my friends are saying, and what other people are saying. But other than that, I mean, I know he's just doing what he needs to do, but then at the same time, like, there's always going to be people who are going to be against him. So.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, I was not expecting, to have this, combination of, international politics and also kind of local experiences of confidence in this area. And so I really appreciate all of the perspective that you brought to the table today.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
All right. You're welcome. Thanks, Dr. Bechill.
Excellent. So I was really proud of Irish. We did that interview on Friday, but because of the length of episode 2, we kind of split it out into a separate mini episode. So thank you again, Irish, for kind of giving us your perspective on what your experience has been, and showing us how small the world really is in having your former mayor make international news. Our next show for Just the Facts podcast is going to be this Friday, April 10th, where my virology class is going to be talking to us about all of these vaccines you keep hearing about for coronavirus, which ones are promising, which ones are not. And please tune in on Friday for more Just the Facts podcast. Have a wonderful evening.